Hello everyone, this is Stephen Balch, your instructor for Introduction to Microeconomics at Ozarka College. Today what I want to do is give you a little bit of a review over the problems that we had on the chapters 12 and 13 assignment. The last couple of questions on the assignment had you work through some problems in the textbook. Specifically problems 13.2 and 13.3 at the end of chapter 13 in your textbook. And so what I'm going to do, several of you had problems with kind of difficulty with getting the correct answers on these two problems on the assignment. So what I thought I would do is kind of review over with you exactly how you would determine the correct answers and actually give you the correct answers for those problems on the assignment. So the first one was problem 13.2, which gave you a graph of marginal private cost and marginal social benefit and marginal private benefit of, in this case, coffee. So, of course, you have the price of coffee over here on the left-hand side on the y-axis of the graph, and then you have quantity of coffee along the bottom or the x-axis of the graph. And so what it wanted you to do is answer some questions related to the basic positive externality that is depicted on this graph. So the first thing it asked us for on part A was, what is the free market equilibrium quantity? So all we would have to do there is, remember, free market is basically private market. So you're looking at the private benefit and private cost. So where those two intersect, so you have the marginal private cost is this red curve, this upward sloping curve here. And then you have the marginal private benefit, which is this darker blue downward sloping curve on the bottom of the graph. So where those two intersect is where you would find the equilibrium quantity, which in this case, if you look at where the private costs intersect the private benefit, that would be at 3 units of coffee. Okay? So the correct answer for part A is 3 units. All right. Then part B is asking you something closely tied to part A, which is, all right, now that we figured out what the free market equilibrium quantity is, what is the associated price at that quantity? Well, all you would have to do again is find where the private benefit intersects the private cost curve, which is right here, and then look over on the y-axis and where the prices are, and that would be a price of $5 per unit. Okay, so the answer to part B is $5. All right. Now, part C asks us, what is the optimal or efficient quantity? Okay, so to find this, what we would need to do is find where the marginal private cost curve intersects the marginal social benefit curve, okay, which is right here. All right, so it's asking us how many units would be produced at that optimal or efficient quantity. What is the optimal or efficient quantity at that point? So that would be 5 units of coffee, okay? So all you do is find where the marginal private cost intersect the marginal social benefit, because this is a positive externality, all right, that we're looking at here. So that would be 5 units there, okay? Just where those two intersect, and then you just draw a straight line down, all right? And then the next thing it asks us, as a result of the positive externality, what happens in this free market? Okay, well, as we learned in chapter 13, when the market experiences a positive externality from the production of a particular good, normally producers are going to underproduce, okay, in that type of market, all right, unless the government intervenes in some way. And so in this case, we can see by looking at the graph that the marginal, let's see, yeah, the producers are going to underproduce in this market because at the free market equilibrium, we said that we're only going to have 3 units produced, but the optimal quantity would be 5 units. So we're producing less than what is socially optimal in this case. So we are underproducing, okay, this type of market. All right, so that's the answer to part D, is underproduces. Now, part E should be fairly simple because in your book it talks about when there's a positive externality in the production of a good or service in a market, and because of that positive externality, producers are going to underproduce what is socially optimal. The only way to get those firms to produce at a socially optimal level is to provide subsidies, okay? Provide incentives for those firms to produce more than what would actually maximize their profit in that particular type of market. So in this case, the government would have to step in, provide a subsidy in order to make the market produce at that socially optimal level, okay? All right, so part E, the answer is corrective subsidies. Then part F asks us, how big should the government corrective taxes or subsidies be in this case? Well, all we would have to do here is look at what is the difference between the socially optimal price and the socially optimal, or the private the socially optimal price and the private cost or price in this particular case. So in this case, you've got basically it would be the difference between this price here. It basically be the distance between your marginally private benefit curve and the marginal social benefit curve. So the difference in those, if you look here, you just kind of look at it on the y-axis, it's the difference between $8 and $11 there. So that distance between the marginal social benefit and the marginal private benefit is what the subsidy value would have to be in order to get producers in this market to produce at that socially optimal level. So it's just the distance between those two curves. So that would be approximately $3. All right. And let's see. And that's the problem 13.2. And then let's also look at problem 13.3. This one was very similar to 13.2, except in this case, instead of giving us a graph that shows a positive externality as a result of the production of a particular good, in this case, it's giving us a negative externality graph, okay? So basically, it's showing us a market where there's a negative externality in the market, in the production, in this case of handbags, okay? So on 13.3, it gave us this graph here, and then it wanted us to answer similar questions to what we answered in the for problem 13.2 on the first graph. So on this one, part A, it's asking us, what is the free market equilibrium quantity? Well, in this case, we would look at the intersection of the marginal private cost and the marginal social benefit right here. All right, where this dark red curve intersects the marginal social benefit curve right here. And where those two intersect is at 4 units. Okay, so the free market equilibrium quantity, where you have this negative externality produced in this type of market, the free market equilibrium quantity is 4 units. That's how much is going to be produced in this type of market if there's no government intervention. Okay, now part B asks us, what is the associated free market equilibrium price at that point? And so all we would have to do there is look at that point that we just figured out for 4 units, and then just look at the y-axis where the prices are. And that associated price is $6. So it's $6 per unit is the free market equilibrium price. All right, now, part C asks us, what is the optimal or efficient quantity? Okay, so for that, we would have to look at where the marginal social cost intersects the marginal social benefit. Okay, and where those two intersect is at a quantity of 3 bags, or 3 units. Okay, all right, so you've got, what is the optimal efficient quantity? Is 3 units. All right, and then part D asks us, as a result of the negative externality that's shown in this graph, what happens in this free market? Well, as we've discussed in chapter 13, when there is a negative externality produced through production in a particular market, it's going to lead to overproduction of that good. Okay, so the answer is overproduces. And you can look at that by looking at the difference between the free market equilibrium quantity and the optimal quantity. Right? Remember, the free market equilibrium quantity we said was 4 units, whereas the optimal or efficient quantity is 3 units. So we can look and see that we are overproducing in this type of market. All right. All right. Then part E asks us, what should the government do in order to ensure the market produces at an optimal level? And in this case, the government would need to impose corrective taxes in this type of market. And this is often what the government does in order to keep pollution under control and so forth in certain markets. They impose a tax so that producers will not produce at the marginal social or marginal private benefit. Instead, they will produce at the socially the social the marginal social cost, basically, is where they would produce that. All right. So so what should the government do in order to ensure that the market produces optimally? Well, they would have to impose taxes on this type of market in order to get producers in this market to produce less at the socially optimal level. Okay. All right. Now, the last question there, part F, asks us, okay, we know that we're going to have to impose taxes. Then how big should that government tax be? All right. And in this case, it's just like we did in problem 13.2. We would have to look at the distance between the marginal private cost curve and the marginal social cost curve. And what that distance is between the two, which in this case is basically about $2 per bag. All right, so it'd be about the difference between, again, this marginal private cost curve and the marginal social cost curve. You can kind of look at it on the left, on the y-axis of the graph there. You'd have basically a difference of 4 minus 2, which is about $2 per unit is what you would have to do as a tax in order to get producers to produce at the socially optimal level. Okay? All right. So hopefully that helped those of you that had some issues with getting the correct answers for these two problems on the assignment. If you have any other questions, or if you didn't understand something I just covered on this, just let me know and I'll be glad to try to explain it to you. It's really not complicated. It's just you have to kind of think about the type of market that you're looking at on the graph, whether it's a positive externality that's shown like on the first graph, or a negative externality, which is what's shown on the second graph. Okay, so just let me know, like I said, if you have questions about this, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, and I will talk to you next time. Thank you.